The 2000s changed everything. Shopping left the mall and moved into the palm of your hand. The internet turned every computer into a storefront, while fast fashion chains filled closets with endless cycles of cheap, disposable style. This was the birth of the infinite aisle, a world where anything could be ordered, anywhere, at any time. And once again, consumer culture flooded faster than anyone could keep up. Before the world was in our pocket, it was at the end of a telephone line. The sound of the late 1990s wasn't a pop song. It was the digital screech of a dial-up modem, a gateway to a new and uncertain frontier. This was the dawn of the World Wide Web, a place of raw text, blinking cursors, and boundless promise. In this digital Wild West, a new kind of storefront was being built, not with bricks and mortar, but with lines of code. The idea of online shopping was a curiosity, a novelty whispered about in chat rooms and on message boards. Could you really buy something from a company you'd never seen, in a city you'd never visited, through a machine on your desk? The very notion felt like science fiction. At the heart of this burgeoning movement was a company that started in a garage in Bellevue, Washington. In 1995, a former Wall Street executive named Jeff Bezos launched a website called Amazon.com. Its mission, ambitious yet focused, was to be Earth's biggest bookstore. The website itself was a relic by today's standards, a simple, text-heavy interface with basic graphics. But the idea it represented was revolutionary. Buying a book, once an errand requiring a trip to a physical store, could now be done from your living room, at any hour of the day. It felt futuristic, almost magical. Yet, this magic was tempered by a healthy dose of skepticism. The dot-com boom was fueling a gold rush mentality, with startups appearing overnight, flush with venture capital and grand promises. For every visionary, there were a dozen opportunists. The public was wary. Handing over your credit card number to a faceless entity on the internet felt like a gamble. This crisis of confidence was the single biggest hurdle for e-commerce to overcome. The dream of a global marketplace could not be realized until the problem of trust was solved. How could you ensure your financial information was safe? How could you pay a stranger for a product you couldn't even touch? The answer came not from one, but a series of crucial innovations. The development of Secure Sockets Layer, or SSL, was a technological breakthrough. That tiny padlock icon that began appearing in browser address bars became a universal symbol of security, an unspoken promise that your data was encrypted and safe from prying eyes. Around the same time, a new company emerged that would fundamentally change the mechanics of online payments. Initially a merger between two startups, Confinity and XCOM, it was rebranded as PayPal. Its genius was its simplicity. It acted as a trusted intermediary. You gave your financial details to PayPal, and only to PayPal. You could then send money to anyone with an email address, without ever exposing your sensitive information to the seller. It was the digital equivalent of a handshake, a bridge of trust built over the anonymous expanse of the internet. While Amazon was building a retail empire, another platform was building a community. In 1995, computer programmer Pierre Omidyar launched a site called Auction Web, which would soon become eBay. The origin story, now a piece of Silicon Valley folklore, claims it was created so his fiancée could trade Pez dispensers. The reality was more visionary. Omidyar saw the internet's potential to create a perfect level marketplace. eBay wasn't a store, it was a global flea market, a digital town square where anyone could become a merchant. It turned the auction into a global pastime. The thrill of the last-second snipe, the hunt for a rare collectible, the satisfaction of winning a bidding war. It was commerce as entertainment. But eBay's most profound innovation was its feedback system. By allowing buyers and sellers to rate each other, it created a self-policing ecosystem of trust. A stranger's reputation, represented by a simple star rating, became their most valuable asset. You weren't just buying a product, you were trusting a person based on the collective experience of a worldwide community. And while the West was focused on selling to consumers, a different kind of revolution was brewing in the East. In a small apartment in Hangzhou, China, a former English teacher named Jack Ma founded Alibaba in 1999. Unlike Amazon or eBay, Alibaba's initial focus wasn't on selling books or collectibles to individuals. Its goal was to connect China's burgeoning manufacturing base with businesses around the world. It was a B2B, or business-to-business platform that opened the doors of the world's factory to any small or medium-sized enterprise with an internet connection. This was the hidden wiring of the new global economy being laid in real time. While Western consumers were just getting comfortable buying a single item online, Alibaba was enabling the movement of entire shipping containers full of goods, setting the stage for the explosion in mass-produced products that was to come. But the unbridled optimism of the 90s was built on a bubble. In 2000, that bubble burst. The dot-com crash was a brutal reckoning. Companies that had been valued in the billions saw their stock prices evaporate overnight. High-profile flameouts like Pets.com and the grocery delivery service Webvan became cautionary tales, symbols of hubris and flawed business models. They had the vision, but they lacked the infrastructure, the logistics, and the patience to build a sustainable business. The crash wiped out the speculators and the dreamers, but the true pioneers endured. Amazon survived because of its relentless, almost obsessive focus on logistics and customer experience, famously following the mantra, "Get big fast." eBay survived because its asset-light model, it held no inventory, made it resilient. The dot-com bust was a forest fire that cleared out the underbrush, allowing the strongest trees to grow taller and stronger, casting long shadows over the entire landscape of commerce. In the wake of the crash, e-commerce entered its adolescence. By the mid-2000s, with the spread of broadband internet, the revolution matured. Amazon, no longer just a bookstore, was rapidly becoming the everything store. It expanded into electronics, clothing, toys, and eventually, anything you could imagine. It pioneered the use of data, with recommendation algorithms that seemed to know what you wanted before you did. In 2005, it unveiled its masterstroke, Amazon Prime. For a flat annual fee, customers got free 2-day shipping. It was a psychological game-changer, transforming shopping from a series of considered purchases into a frictionless habit. The impact on traditional retail was seismic. The first casualties were the category killers, like the bookstore giant Borders, which couldn't compete with Amazon's endless selection and aggressive pricing. The mall wasn't just coming to us anymore, it was being rebuilt in our own image, personalized and available 24/7. The endless scrollable pages of products were a new reality. Convenience wasn't just a selling point, it was the new foundation of shopping, a powerful and seductive force that would reshape our world in ways we were only beginning to understand. While the internet changed how we bought, fast fashion changed what we bought. Chains like Zara, H&M, and Forever 21 built entire empires by copying high-fashion runway looks and producing them in weeks. Clothing became cheaper, faster, and more disposable. Where once fashion followed 4 seasons, now there were dozens of micro-seasons, each designed to keep consumers coming back for more. E-commerce and fast fashion created a dizzying marketplace of infinite choice. Thousands of nearly identical products at the click of a button. Cheap clothes worn once and tossed aside. Choice promised freedom, but it also led to decision fatigue, overconsumption, and the rise of shopping as a form of entertainment. The act of buying itself became addictive, a way to fill the endless scroll with meaning. The 2000s weren't just about products, they were about platforms. Social media began reshaping how people discovered and consumed. MySpace and Facebook turned personal expression into curated profiles filled with brands. YouTube gave rise to haul videos, unboxings, and peer-to-peer advertising before the term influencer even existed. Shopping and self-image fused together in ways the mall never could. But behind the glittering promise of convenience, a darker reality was taking shape. The digital storefront, so clean and inviting, was merely the final, polished link in a long and often brutal chain. This new era of consumption was built on a foundation of hidden costs. Costs that would be measured not in dollars and cents, but in human lives and environmental devastation. The true price of a $5 t-shirt was about to come into sharp focus, and the world would be forced to look. The engine of this revolution was fueled by human hands, millions of them, primarily belonging to young women in developing nations like Bangladesh, Vietnam, and Cambodia. The logic was simple and ruthless. Find the cheapest labor, wherever it might be. In sprawling, often poorly constructed factories, workers toiled for more than 12 hours a day for wages that barely constituted a living. They were caught in a vice, squeezed by factory owners who were themselves pressured by colossal Western brands demanding faster turnarounds and lower prices with each passing season. The relentless pace of micro-seasons meant there was no room for error, no time for rest, and certainly no tolerance for dissent. Attempts to unionize were often met with intimidation and dismissal. It was a system designed for maximum extraction of both resources and human energy. And then, on April 24, 2013, the abstract cost became horrifyingly concrete. In Savar, on the outskirts of Dhaka, Bangladesh, an 8-story building known as Rana Plaza shuddered. The day before, large, ominous cracks had appeared in its support columns. Engineers had been called, and they had declared the building unsafe, ordering an immediate evacuation. The shops and the bank on the lower floors closed. But the 5 garment factories housed on the upper floors were a different story. Under immense pressure to complete outstanding orders for major international retailers, managers ordered the thousands of garment workers, mostly women, to return to their sewing machines. They were told that if they didn't work, they wouldn't be paid. Faced with an impossible choice between their safety and their livelihood, they went inside. Shortly before 9 a.m., the power went out. The building's massive generators kicked in, and their vibrations were the final straw. The structure pancaked, collapsing in on itself in less than 90 seconds. The world watched in horror as a desperate rescue effort unfolded. For weeks, volunteers and emergency crews pulled survivors and bodies from the rubble. In the end, more than 1,134 people were dead, and some 2,500 more were injured, many permanently. Amidst the concrete and twisted rebar, rescuers found the labels of the brands the workers were sewing for, brands familiar to shoppers thousands of miles away. Rana Plaza was not an accident, it was an inevitability. It was the tragic, logical conclusion of a system that prioritized profit above all else. The collapse sent a shockwave through the industry, leading to the landmark Accord on Fire and Building Safety in Bangladesh, a legally binding agreement that forced brands to help fund safety improvements. It was a crucial step, but it was a solution born from an unimaginable tragedy. The toll was not only measured in human lives, the planet was paying a steep price as well. The very fiber of fast fashion, cotton, is one of the thirstiest crops on Earth. It can take over 2,700 liters of water to produce the cotton needed for a single t-shirt, enough for one person to drink for 2.5 years. This insatiable demand for water has contributed to ecological disasters, like the shrinking of the Aral Sea. Once the production process moved into the factory, the assault on the environment intensified. Vast quantities of toxic chemicals and synthetic dyes were used to treat and color the fabrics. In many manufacturing hubs, this chemical-laden wastewater was discharged, often untreated, directly into local rivers and streams. Waterways like the Citarum River in Indonesia became known as the world's most polluted, their waters turning the color of the season's latest trend, poisoning the drinking water for millions and destroying aquatic ecosystems. And what happened when these clothes, designed to be disposable, were finally discarded? They became a global crisis. The rise of synthetic fabrics like polyester, a plastic derived from petroleum, meant that our clothes were now a source of plastic pollution. With every wash, these garments shed millions of tiny microplastic fibers, which flowed from our washing machines into the oceans, contaminating marine life and entering the human food chain. The sheer volume of clothing being thrown away was staggering. The average consumer was buying 60% more clothing than they did in the year 2000, but keeping each item for only half as long. Globally, an estimated 92 million tons of textiles waste is created each year. A garbage truck full of clothes ends up in a landfill or incinerator every single second. The dream of recycling offered little comfort. Less than 1% of clothing is recycled into new garments, largely because the blended fabrics of fast fashion are incredibly difficult and expensive to separate. Much of our donated clothing isn't resold locally. Instead, it's bundled into massive bales and shipped to countries in the global south, overwhelming their local markets and creating environmental catastrophes. In places like the Atacama Desert in Chile, mountains of discarded Western clothing now scar the landscape, a surreal technicolor monument to our throwaway culture. The global shipping chains that made it all possible were the final piece of the puzzle. Every t-shirt, every pair of jeans, embarked on a complex journey across the globe, carried on massive container ships burning heavy fuel oil. The fashion industry's carbon footprint swelled, eventually accounting for up to 10% of global carbon emissions, more than all international flights and maritime shipping combined. Products became cheaper, yes, but their true human and environmental cost grew heavier with every click, every purchase, every delivery. The infinite aisle, that dazzling digital promise of endless choice and effortless acquisition, came with an invisible price tag of staggering proportions. It was a debt being paid by the planet, and by the very people whose hands stitched our new world together. The 2000s didn't just end, they bled into our present, laying down a digital and logistical framework that would become the very architecture of modern life. This was the decade that built the infrastructure of our new consumerism. It wasn't a loud, sudden construction, but a quiet, relentless rewiring of society itself. After the dot-com bubble burst, the companies that survived, like Amazon and eBay, rose from the ashes with a hardened resolve. They weren't just selling products, they were selling a new way of life. E-commerce, fast fashion, and the first whispers of social media didn't just change how we shopped. They fundamentally altered our perception of time, distance, and desire. They changed how we lived. The launch of the first smartphones, culminating in the 2007 unveiling of the iPhone, was the pivotal moment. Suddenly, the internet wasn't something you visited on a desktop computer. It was a constant companion, an extension of our own minds. The world, with its endless marketplace, was now nestled in our pockets, waiting to be summoned with a tap or a swipe. This device became a Trojan horse, carrying with it not just communication, but commerce. The App Store, launched a year later, opened the floodgates. Every brand, every store, every service could now build a direct, intimate channel to its customers, delivering a dopamine hit with every notification, every sale, every add to cart. And through this channel flowed a torrent of goods. The quiet arrival of an Amazon box on a doorstep became a defining ritual of the era. At first, it was a novelty, a book, a DVD. Soon, it was everything. Those cardboard smiles piling up at front doors across the country were more than just deliveries. They were symbols of a monumental shift. They represented the triumph of logistics, the conquest of the last mile, and the dawn of an age of unprecedented convenience. A new normal was being established, one where waiting was an archaic concept and instant gratification was the expected standard. The local shopkeeper, the curated boutique, the weekend trip to the mall, they were all being quietly, irrevocably displaced by the silent, efficient hum of a distant warehouse and the algorithm that knew what you wanted before you did. This new world, built on the promise of the infinite aisle, made everything available, all the time, to everyone. It was a dizzying proposition. But this liberation came with a hidden psychological cost. The sheer volume of choice was overwhelming, giving rise to what psychologist Barry Schwartz termed the paradox of choice. More options didn't necessarily lead to more satisfaction, but often to paralysis, anxiety, and a nagging fear of making the wrong decision. To navigate this endless digital shelf, we turned to a new form of social proof, the online review. The wisdom of the crowd, aggregated into a 5-star rating, replaced the trusted advice of a local merchant. And into this landscape of endless options and algorithmic recommendations, 2 generations came of age. Millennials were the pioneers, the transitional generation. They were the first to navigate the shift from dial-up to broadband, from MySpace to Facebook. They embraced online shopping as a newfound freedom, documenting their fast fashion hauls on early YouTube, creating the very blueprint for the influencer economy. For them, the digital marketplace was a thrilling new frontier. But for Gen Z, the generation that followed, this frontier was simply home. They were born into a world where the smartphone was a fifth limb and the infinite aisle was the baseline expectation. They never knew a time before two-day shipping or a social feed filled with targeted ads. Their relationship with consumption is, therefore, profoundly different. It is native, intuitive, but also more critical. Having never known the before, they are uniquely positioned to see the cracks in the after. They inherited not just the convenience, but the consequences. Because the flood of products, choices, and trends was only just beginning. As the 2000s gave way to the 2010s, social media platforms like Instagram and TikTok would supercharge this cycle of consumption to an unimaginable degree. The algorithm didn't just show you what you liked, it created a filter bubble of desire, a personalized echo chamber of consumption that made it feel as if the entire world was buying the same things you were. The feed became the new storefront, and every user a potential advertiser. The line between life and lifestyle, between authentic expression and paid promotion, blurred into non-existence. Even late at night, a teenager could scroll endlessly, their desires shaped in real time by a global network of trends and influencers, swept up in the accelerating tide of change. Yet, it is from within this very system that a powerful countercurrent began to form. The legacy of the 2000s is a dual one. It created the culture of hyperconsumption, but it also planted the seeds of its most potent critique. Tragedies like the 2013 Rana Plaza factory collapse in Bangladesh, which killed over 1,100 garment workers, served as a horrifying wake-up call, pulling back the curtain on the human cost of cheap clothing. Having grown up witnessing the environmental and social fallout, the mountains of textile waste, the stories of exploited workers, Gen Z and a growing number of millennials began to question the true cost of a $5 t-shirt. A new consciousness dawned. Movements centered on sustainability, ethical production, and anti-consumption gained traction. Thrifting, once a niche activity, became a mainstream badge of honor. The circular economy, upcycling, and mending became buzzwords of a generation looking for an alternative. The same social media platforms that fueled fast fashion also became organizing hubs for its opposition, where hashtags demanding transparency and accountability could go viral. So, what is the ultimate legacy of this transformative decade? It is one of profound and enduring contradiction. The 2000s handed us a world of unparalleled access and convenience, a consumerist utopia where almost anything we could desire is just a click away. But it also burdened us with the immense weight of its consequences: environmental degradation, labor exploitation, and a culture of disposability that clogs our planet. As we look to the future, we see these two legacies charting divergent paths. One path leads toward even deeper integration. Imagine augmented reality allowing you to try on clothes in a virtual dressing room, or artificial intelligence so powerful it curates a shopping list based on your subconscious desires, delivering it via drone before you've even thought to ask. It's a future of seamless, predictive, and utterly frictionless consumption. The creator economy will evolve, with hyper-targeted micro-influencers fostering trust within niche communities, selling not just products, but belonging. But another path is also coming into view, carved out by those who seek a different way. It's a path defined by intention and mindfulness. It champions the local artisan over the global conglomerate, the repaired garment over the disposable trend. It leverages technology not for faster consumption, but for greater transparency, using blockchain to trace a product's journey from source to shelf. It's a future where the value of an object is measured not by its price tag, but by its durability, its story, and its impact on the world. The choice between these futures is not preordained. The infrastructure built in the 2000s remains. The smartphone is still in our hands. The infinite aisle still beckons. The legacy of that era is not a final verdict, but a question posed to each of us, every single day, with every single tap of the screen. It asks what we truly value, and what kind of world we want to build with the powerful tools we've inherited. The choice, now and forever, is ours. In the 2010s, consumerism went viral. Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok made every product a trend, every person a brand, and every moment shoppable. Next up is the impact of social media and the saturation of trends.